When you reach your early 70 seconds, nobody prepares you for how quiet things get. They are not the quiet of a peaceful morning, a different kind of quiet. The kind where the phone stops ringing as often as it used to, where whole days pass and you realize you have not laughed the way you used to laugh. People warned you about your knees. They warned you about your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your sleep. Doctors talked to you about medications. Your children talked to you about diet. But not one single person sat you down and said, listen, after 70, some of the things you are doing right now are slowly making your life smaller. And the moment you stop doing them, something opens up again. I am 68 years old, and I want to talk to you about 7 things I stopped doing after 70. Things I watched change the lives of people I love. I want you to walk away from this feeling like someone finally told you the truth. Not to lecture you, not to give you a list to stick on your refrigerator. Just one person sitting across the kitchen table from another, telling you what they wish they had known sooner. See, Dud, there is still so much good ahead of you. I promise you that. See, Dud, the first thing I stopped doing was waiting for other people to make me feel needed. I am going to be honest with you about something I am not proud of. For a long time after I turned 68, I would sit in my chair in the evening and feel a heaviness I could not name. I kept thinking, why don't they call more? Why doesn't anyone ask my opinion anymore? I was waiting to be needed, waiting for someone to knock on the door and say, we need you, and that waiting felt like being useful. It was not. It was just loneliness wearing a very convincing disguise. See, Dud, I knew a man named Gerald, retired school teacher from Ohio, 41 years in the classroom, sharp man, loved deeply by everyone who knew him. When he retired, he sat back and waited for his family to orbit around him, the way his students once did. They loved him, but they had their own lives. 6 months into retirement, Gerald had started sleeping until noon. His daughter called me once, worried. She said, Dad seems like he disappeared inside himself. Gerald was not unloved. He was just waiting to be needed instead of deciding to be useful. It took a health scare, a small one thankfully, to wake him up. He started volunteering at the local library, reading to children on Thursday mornings. And he told me, almost with tears, that a 6-year-old girl had grabbed his hand one Thursday and said, you tell the best stories, mister. He cried in his car after that. Good tears. I still remember the afternoon I stopped waiting. I was sitting by my kitchen window, watching a cardinal on the fence post, and I thought, nobody is coming to give you purpose today. You have to walk toward it yourself. So here is what I want you to try. This week, do one thing for someone without being asked. Not a grand gesture. Call a neighbor you haven't spoken to in months. Drop off something small for someone who lives alone. Offer to drive someone to an appointment. Need does not always announce itself. Sometimes you have to look for where you can quietly place yourself. That small step is the beginning of everything. The second thing I stopped doing was pretending the losses were not losses. For years I told myself I was fine. My wife used to say, you never grieve properly, you just move forward. She was right. I would lose someone, a friend, a brother, a neighbor, and I would go to the service, say the right things, squeeze the right hands, and then come home and make dinner and watch the evening news as if nothing had shifted. I told myself that was strength. Looking back now, I think it was just fear. Grief that does not move through you does not disappear. It settles. I knew a woman named Ruth. She was 74. Lost her husband of 51 years on a Tuesday in February. 2 weeks later, she was at every church function, baking, smiling. Everyone said, isn't she remarkable? I thought so too. But the following winter, Ruth stopped leaving her house. Not dramatically, just slowly, the way a fire goes out when nobody adds wood. When her daughter finally got her to a doctor, Ruth said she hadn't cried once since the funeral. Not once in 11 months. The grief had turned into something else entirely, something heavy and immovable. She recovered, slowly, gently, but it took far longer than it needed to because she had waited too long to let it out. I still catch myself reaching for the phone to call people who have been gone for years, and every time it happens, I let myself feel it for a moment. Isn't that something? The heart does not keep calendars. It just keeps loving. Let yourself grieve properly. You do not need to fall apart in public, but find one private moment, a walk, a quiet room, a letter you write to someone who is gone. Grief that is given a door will eventually walk through it. Grief that is locked inside becomes the walls of a smaller and smaller life. Your letting yourself feel it is not weakness. It is the most honest thing a person can do. The third thing I stopped doing was living as if the body was my enemy. I spent years after 65 arguing with my body. Every stiff morning felt like a betrayal. Every slow walk, every forgotten word, every afternoon nap felt like evidence that something was going wrong. I talked about my body the way a disappointed parent talks to a child who keeps making mistakes. I was impatient with it, embarrassed by it sometimes. I knew a man named Robert, retired Marine, broad-shouldered, proud man, turned 71 and started refusing to use the handrail on his porch stairs because he said it made him feel old. His daughter asked him to please use it. He said, "I'm fine, sweetheart." One wet morning in October. Down he went. Hip fracture, surgery, 3 months in rehabilitation. When I visited him there, he looked out the window of that facility and said to me, "I wasted a whole year being too proud to hold a railing. Don't be like me." The handrail was not the enemy. His pride was. There is a moment that stays with me. A morning last spring, I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee, and the sunlight came through the oak tree in pieces, and I felt the warmth of it on my old hands. And I thought, this body carried me here, to this morning, to this cup of coffee, to this light. That is not a failing body. That is a faithful one. Be kind to your body this week, not by doing something dramatic. Just stop talking badly about it. When your knees ache, say thank you for getting me this far. When your eyes strain, say thank you for everything you have shown me. The body responds to kindness the same way people do. Treating your body with gentleness is not giving up. It is finally growing up. The fourth thing I stopped doing was letting silence become empty. There is a difference between solitude and loneliness that took me a long time to understand. Loneliness is when silence feels like punishment. Solitude is when silence feels like companionship. For a while, every quiet moment in my house felt like evidence that I had been forgotten. I would turn on the television just to fill the rooms with voices, not because I wanted to watch anything, just because silence scared me. I knew a woman named Evelyn, 73 years old, former librarian from Vermont. When her children moved away and her husband passed, she told me the silence in her house became almost physical, like something pressing on her chest. She said she slept with the radio on for 2 years. Then a friend gave her a small bird feeder for her kitchen window. She started watching the birds every morning with her tea. Cardinals, chickadees, a fat little sparrow she named Douglas. She told me I started looking forward to mornings again. One bird feeder. That is all it took to turn empty silence into gentle solitude. Cudderly rain on a window, coffee going cold, a single bird on a wire. These small things are not small at all. They are the texture of a life still being lived. Cudderly, this week, instead of filling the silence with noise, sit with it for 10 minutes. Watch the light change in your room. Notice what you hear. Silence that you choose feels entirely different from silence that chooses you. Practice choosing it, and it will stop feeling like loneliness and start feeling like peace. Cudderly, quiet is not emptiness. Quiet is where you remember who you actually are. Cudderly, the fifth thing I stopped doing was comparing my pace to anyone else's. I will confess something. When my neighbor Francis, he's 74, started doing morning walks and lost 30 pounds, I felt something I am not proud of. Not happiness for him. Something more like shame about myself. I started measuring my days against other people's days, against what I used to be able to do, against some imaginary standard of what a healthy 68-year-old should look like. It was exhausting, and it was cruel. I knew a man named Leonard, retired accountant from Pennsylvania. His son was a marathon runner. Every Thanksgiving, his son would talk about miles and times and training plans, and Leonard would sit quietly and eat his turkey and feel smaller and smaller. He told me once, "I used to walk 3 miles a day and feel proud. Now I feel ashamed that I can only do 1. The miles did not change. His measurement changed. He had borrowed someone else's ruler and started measuring his life with it. When he threw away that ruler and started just walking his 1 mile for the simple joy of morning air and moving legs, he said the walk felt like a gift again instead of a failure. There is something I love about the way old trees grow. They do not grow faster just because the younger trees are taller. They just keep growing in the direction of the light, quietly, steadily, at their own beautiful pace. And Hyla, walk your 1 mile, read your few pages, cook your 1 good meal, and stop measuring it against anyone else's marathon. Your pace is not behind, your pace is yours. And Hylo, at your speed and in your direction, that is exactly the right way to go. And Hylo, the 6th thing I stopped doing was treating the past as a better country than the present. I used to live there in the past, more than I should have. I would sit and revisit old decades like a man flipping through a photograph album who has forgotten to look up at the room he is actually sitting in. Those were good years. I am not saying they weren't, but somewhere along the way the remembering became a way of avoiding the strange new shape of my days, avoiding the work of finding something worth loving about right now. I knew a woman named Connie, 77. She had been a wonderful cook, legendary Sunday dinners for 30 years. When her children married and moved away and the dinners stopped, she told me she simply could not find a reason to cook anymore. She said, "It's not the same cooking for one." She lived on crackers and soup for almost a year. Her past self, the one at the head of a full table, felt so much more real to her than the woman sitting alone in that quiet kitchen. One day her granddaughter called and asked, "Grandma, can you teach me to make your peach cobbler?" Just over the phone, step by step. Connie stood at her counter, peaches and flour and butter, and talked her granddaughter through every step. When she hung up, she said she cried happy tears over that bowl. The kitchen came back to life, not because it was the same, because it found a new reason. The sunlight coming through your window right now is not less than the sunlight from 30 years ago. It is the same sun, still warm, still generous, still yours. Edie, find one thing about today to be genuinely curious about. Not grateful, that is too big an ask some days, just curious. What will the evening light look like from your porch tonight? What will tomorrow's coffee taste like? Curiosity is a small door, but it opens into something wide. Evie, the past was beautiful. The present is still happening. That is not a small thing. Evie, the 7th thing I stopped doing was saying I'm fine when I wasn't. This one is the hardest for me to talk about, because I was raised, like many people my age, to believe that keeping quiet about struggle was dignity, that needing help was weakness, that saying I am not okay was somehow a burden you put on people who loved you. And so for a long time I said I'm fine to everyone. Evie, I knew a man named Arthur, 81 years old, retired physician from Georgia. A man who had spent 50 years telling other people to speak up about their symptoms, to come in earlier, to not wait. He waited almost a full year to mention to anyone that he felt a kind of sadness he could not shake. He kept saying, "I'm managing. I've seen real suffering. This is nothing." But the weight of it kept growing. When his wife finally sat across from him and said, "Arthur, I need you to tell me the truth," he broke open, just quietly, right there at their kitchen table over 2 cups of morning coffee. He told her everything, and she held his hands. and he said it was the first morning in 11 months he felt like himself again. Not because the sadness vanished, but because it was no longer his alone. There is something almost physical about saying the truth out loud to someone who loves you. The air in the room changes. The chest loosens. Something that was locked begins very slowly to open. This week, find one person you trust. You do not need a long conversation. You do not need to explain everything. Just say, "I've been having some hard days." That is enough. That is the beginning of not carrying it alone anymore. Asking for honesty is not weakness. It is the bravest, most loving thing you can do for yourself and for everyone who loves you. You are not failing because life feels heavier after 70. You are carrying a body and a mind and a heart that have been through decades of living, through joy and grief and change and loss, and they simply require more intention now than they once did. That is not decline. That is depth. The heaviness you feel some mornings is not a sign that your good years are behind you. It is a sign that you have lived fully enough to feel the weight of it all. Stop waiting to be needed. Let yourself grieve. Be kind to your body. Sit with silence until it becomes your friend. Walk your own pace. Come back to the present and tell someone the truth. These are not complicated instructions. They are just the quiet, steady work of living well in the years that the world does not prepare you for. There is still deep beauty available to you, not in spite of your age, because of it. You have earned a kind of seeing that younger people simply do not have yet. Use it. Let it be enough. Let today, with its coffee and its light and its small, ordinary moments, be enough. You deserve gentleness, most of all from yourself. If something in this conversation touched something real for you today, I would be grateful if you stayed a little longer and watched the next video, where we talk about what happens to your sense of identity after retirement and why so many people are surprised by how that loss feels. You are not alone in it, and there is a way through. I will see you there.